And literally, like, I think it was a week or two later, we're like, boom, got an accepted offer. Saved 50 grand on the asking price. So there are still deals out there. Yeah. And they're cash flowing basically as soon as they get the 2 units rented and then add the ADU, it's just going to be massive cash flow. So they actually inspired me to do the same exact thing. I got a property under contract since our last meetup. And we're going to make a single family, we're going to add 2 more units, and then an ADU, and we're going to be cash flowing like $5,500 a month. Come on. Nice. So,
my wife and I set a goal to build or start to do a garage conversion on our ADU at our house. So we've submitted the plans, that's underway. And then we're getting a rental vacation license to go and Airbnb a separate part of the house out. So basically gonna have like 3 units on our house and be house hacking our home. So we're on our way, and yeah, so that's our goal. So right now, turn to somebody next to you, introduce yourself, share what your 90-day goal is. What are you going to do to move closer to achieving your real estate goals by the end of Q1? So go ahead, we'll take like 2 minutes, 3 minutes to share and chat with your neighbor. Bring it back in, guys. Bring it back in. Okay. I love the energy in the room. I see the excitement. There is extreme power in setting 90-day goals. Instead of having a year goal, break it down into a 90-day goal. There's so much more power in achieving your dreams if you set smaller or bigger goals in a shorter time frame. So
now who's willing to share one of their goals? Yes. You know why we're asking this, right? Is because it holds you accountable. So next time we're going to remember, we're going to be like, hey, how are you doing with that goal? Maybe you haven't achieved it yet, but the next time we ask, I bet you're going to have a fire lit.
All right. Who wants to share?
There.
Jose.
Close 6 units.
Awesome.
In 90 days.
90 days.
All right. Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Everyone hold him accountable for that. And help him, too. If you got a 6 unit, let me know where.
Who else? Who else? Yeah.
There you go. See?
I want to close.
Close on 6
transactions.
units.
Yeah.
Close 6.
Oh, sell 6 units.
Oh, sell 6 something. Okay, got it.
See, and you got it defining, right?
See, well done. All right.
And before we thought it was
Yeah, everyone has an apartment building for sale.
Okay. Who else has a?
Veronica?
Yes, so on June 3rd, I closed on 3 units that weren't completely done. So I went in and I renovated the 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That's done. The studio should be done in 2 months. That's my goal. The ADU in the back, that's a warehouse right now, will be converted in a year, but that's my immediate goal.
Sweet.
Studio for Donnie.
Nice.
Awesome.
With her custom chef kitchen, so she can pick up the store.
Let's do a show of hands, like who owns an investment property right now? Okay, and then who wants to buy one that doesn't have one yet? Okay, see, that's good. So connect with the people that already own them because they know what to do. They already have some.
Yeah, a lot of experience in this room. So just lean on the people around you, and investors love sharing stories about how they got their deals and stuff like that. So yeah, this is why we gather. We want to inspire you guys to take action, move yourself forward to that goal. So
yeah, I'm going to introduce Jay, and then we'll probably talk a little bit more about investing afterwards because we'll just bring it full circle. And if you have questions, like we'll come up with him and like ask him, but he's like a wealth of knowledge when it comes to 1031 exchanges, and also he is an owner in Keller Williams, so he knows a lot about real estate, and so he's here to share. He's got plenty of experience. I think 20 years in real estate, and then how many years did you work at IPX? Was it IPX?
what was that? How long were you at IPX? Like 10 years?
Decade, yeah.
A decade.
Yeah.
And he did over $1 billion in 1031 exchange transactions. So Jay Peet knows how to do 1031 exchanges. He knows the ins and outs of the rules, the code, the law. He's an investor specialist that we are able to tap into at KW anytime when we have a client who's doing a 1031 and they need to vet something like, hey, can we exchange this? Can we move into it? What are the rules? Jay's our guy we turn to as a resource. And he's helped us do a lot of 1031 exchanges for clients, myself personally, my family. So
And then also, if you aren't familiar with the 1031, well, that's why he's here, and he's going to define it and break it down for you. And yeah.
So introducing Jay Peet.
Thanks, guys. So I was with an exchange company for a little over a decade. Did almost $2 billion in 1031 exchange business. So it was a substantial amount of activity, from large deals to multiple breakups to estate planning. I became a certified exchange specialist. There's only 100 of us in the world. We train attorneys and CPAs, and it was a fun job. I really enjoyed it. Why I left that business is because I was having, I think, an incredible impact on a swath of individuals that I would only see once every time they sold a piece of property, 4 or 5 years. I wasn't having a big enough impact on the people that are involved in my life, and that's why I left IPX and came and absorbed the Keller Williams opportunity. My major definite purpose, and if you haven't defined one for yourself, I challenge you to do that this year. Why are you on this earth? What is it that powers your batteries? What makes you feel good? Once you know your major definite purpose, everything in life falls into place. My major definite purpose is to change as many human lives for the positive as I can before I leave this earth. And that's how I align with Keller Williams, because their business model is really similar to what I believe in, and that's why I'm there. I'm here today to talk a little bit about 1031 exchanges, the company or the industry that I was involved in for a number of years. How many of you here have done multiple exchanges and know the ins and outs?
Pretty good.
Couple? All right. So most of you have kind of a fundamental knowledge. How many of you know what a 1031 exchange is? Okay, awesome. Just kind of get a beat on where we're going to go and why, what direction to take. Because the 1031 exchange is probably one of the last great tax advantages that are allowed real property owners. Both the federal government and the state recognize the 1031 exchange opportunity and allow us to exercise that. I'll tell you this too, every year politicians try to strike it from the tax code. Right? Oh my gosh, there's all this money. Politicians. Apologize if there's any in the room. But the economists, then they consult the economists, right? Like, don't strike the exchange, because this is what happens. When a property sells, there's improvements. There's title insurance. There's tax basis is going up. There's real estate commissions. There's all of these things that happen, and those are all taxed at the ordinary income tax rate. So they see the wisdom in what's happening there and say, okay, well, they don't mess with it. And there's always a threat. I swear there's a threat every year, a new threat. Every 4 years at least, when the administration turns over, there's a threat to the exchange. But have no fear, I highly doubt it will ever go away because of what it does for the economy. So what is it, and why do we want to participate in it? If you're in this room, it's because you have the desire, need, or want to own investment real estate. And it doesn't really matter how much money you make, it's how much money you get to keep that makes the difference.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a property that you've held for a while and you have the desire to sell that asset because you're trading up, like you have a triplex, you have a single property, you want to buy a fourplex, you're going to sell this asset to buy that asset. What the IRS allows you to do is to defer all of the gain, pay no taxes on this property. You bought it 20 years ago, you buy it today, and you own it for 20 years. You've got $1 million in gain. But if you do a 1031 exchange, you pay zero tax, not one red cent to the state and or the federal government. Like power tool, isn't it? So now basically what you're doing is you're borrowing all that taxable liability and using that to grow your net worth. Nice little background sound there. So super powerful tool, but there's some rules. Now, why does the exchange exist? The Starker family back in the 70s sold an orange grove that they had in Hawaii, and they took 2 years to find a replacement property. They found it in Florida, and they left the money in escrow. They bought a property in Florida, and they claimed to the IRS that they really didn't take possession of the money. Subsequently, they were executing an exchange, because the exchanges have been around since before, like 1919. You know, I've got a cornfield. Tyler has a wheat field. My cornfield has been depleted of the natural resources that I want to grow great corn. His has done the opposite on wheat. They take two different elements, so we just swap land. And when we swap the land, there's no exchange of money. Taxes or no taxes are due. And so the Starker family said, we did just that. We took our money from this property to that property, and we didn't touch it, so we're executing exchange. The IRS said, nope, that's not true. That's not going to happen. Taxes are due. Starker family said, up yours. We're suing you. They sued the IRS, and guess what? The IRS lost.
Woo!
Yeah, how's that? Go Starker! So what came out of that though is the IRS has this like big black eye, and they're like, okay, fine. If we're going to lose, now we're going to say these things you have to do, and if you don't do these, you can't exchange. So they put 4 fundamental principles in place. Right? The first is that you have to have a property that is in the service of one that's an investment or use and trade or your business. Right? That's that like kind. And we're gonna use an acronym on your little on your handouts there. You'll see the LTVs, because anybody that's owned a piece of property know what an LTV is, right? Loan to value. That's
Right.
Every time you borrow money. So if you remember the LTVV, just throw one more V on there. We'll have the 4 fundamental principles of the 1031 exchange. Right? All right, so your LTVs. The L, first L, is your like kind. What does that mean exactly? Right? Similar, right? You would think, right? That doesn't mean that if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a cypress tree in the front yard, you have to go buy a 2-bedroom, 3-bath house with a cypress tree in the front yard. The definition of like kind in real estate is incredibly broad. And it means anything that you've primarily held for investment or use and trade of your business. So you could own a hotel, right? You could sell the hotel and buy multiple family. You could buy residential. You could sell vacant land that was in the path of development and buy residential. You can do anything you want with the exchange property as long as your intent at the time of purchase or when you sold it is to hold it for investment purposes and or use and trade of a business. So if you, let's say you own a liquor store or a gas station, like you clearly don't live there, that can be exchanged. So you can sell the gas station that you own and buy an apartment complex with the money. Absolutely allowable. What isn't allowable, so it's almost easier to talk about what doesn't qualify, because everything else does. So what doesn't qualify? Your primary residence. You know, that's where you live, that you're primarily using that for your home. Now there's some exceptions to that too. Like what if you have a home, but you also have a vineyard, or an orchard, or an avocado grove, or you have stables, or you have have an auto shop that you're running off there. You work on classic cars. The IRS has a term for that, and it's called bifurcation. And this is where the exchange can be really fun, right? So you've got a property that let's say you bought it for $500,000 15, 20 years ago. It's worth $1.5 million today. And as a married man, or you can put or married persons, you can put $250 per in your pocket at the time of sale. It's $500,000 in gain. You've got $1 million in gain though, so shoot, you're going to pay tax on $500,000. Well, not if you bifurcated the property. So I tell the IRS, well, 50% of the property is my primary residence. The other 50% I held for investment purposes. So at the time of sale, I get to put the $500,000 in my pocket if I'm married, $250 if you're single, and then I do a 1031 exchange on the rest to put that money into an income-producing property.
Nice.
And if you have clients, if you're in that business or you own property that can be bifurcated in that way, know that there's an exchange opportunity for you to really capitalize on taking advantage of Revenue Procedure 121, which is if you lived in a house for 2 out of the last 5 years, you get to put $250,000 in your pocket, $500 if you're married. And then 1031, you can 1031 into another investment property. So you get to use 2 rules that are super powerful and a great tool to use. So for most people, if your primary residence is just that, it normally will not qualify. Right? And that's basically it. Personal property also doesn't qualify. Like you can't exchange personal for real property. Yes, Ben.
What's the loophole for maybe not a loophole, but the year rule where you have to keep it as an investment for a single family?
Sure. Okay. What Ben might be alluding to is for decades, right? Prior to just post 1985, when the IRS said, okay, here's how the exchange rules work. People would, and then along came Rev Proc 121, where you can take your primary residence exemption, right? Those if you live in a primary. So people were doing exchanges, and then they move into the house. So they've deferred all this gain. They move into a house. They live in it 2 years, and they satisfy the 121 exemption. So you've lived in your house 2 of the last 5 years, I'm going to sell it, and if I'm married, I put $500,000 in my pocket, single 250, right? So they avoid all their taxes. In 2008, the IRS published a document, Revenue Procedure 2008-16, in which they drew a bright line in the sand. Whereas if you exchange into a property that is a dwelling unit, it's got cooking facility, bedrooms, and a bathroom, you must, if you're exchanging out of it, that must have been in service for 2 years. If you're exchanging into it, right, you have to have it in service for 2 years. You can move into it after 2 years. And then when you sell it, you'll only get the percentage of time you were in it to take as your primary residence exemption, and you'll pay tax on the rest. So they close that loophole. Now, because of that, the conventional wisdom for most CPAs is that if you're doing a 1031 exchange, if you hold the property for 2 years, after 2 years your exchange is ratified, you can do whatever you want with the property. You can move right into it. Because what we're talking about here is vacation properties with 2008-16. If vacation property means that you're using it in addition to the time that you're renting it out. And the rule states very clearly that you can spend 2 weeks or 10% of the time that you rent it out per year in that property, keeping it in service for 2 years. After 2 years, you convert it to your primary if you want, but you'll never be able to get the full primary residence exemption. Okay.
Jay,
Well, yes,
I have a question.
fire away.
I have a client who was interested in doing this, but it's a little different because he had investments, commercial investments, and so he wanted to do a 1031 exchange for residential. So he would have to purchase something and then rent it out for 2 years in order to qualify for that exemption, and then he would move in.
So again, I think that one of the first and foremost things we want to tell ourselves, and I'll tell everybody here, I'm not an attorney, nor am I a CPA, and I cannot give you tax and or legal advice. So he's got to talk to his CPA about what he feels comfortable filing with. Because of that 2008-16, most CPAs to cover all their bases and feel super warm and fuzzy, because that rule described dwelling unit, 2 years is what anybody will say. Now, most CPAs though, that I think are astute, will say, unless you close escrow on January 1, if you own a property for 12 months, right? And what we're talking about deferring when we're doing a 1031 exchange is long-term capital gains. How long do you have to own a property for long-term capital gains to be in effect? 1 year, right? So if you own a property for 1 year, you've now converted it from what would be normally ordinary income tax. So if I buy property today, fix it up, sell it 6 months from now, I'm paying ordinary income tax on that money. If I wait a full year and sell it, I will only pay long-term capital gains. So in this scenario, let's say I close escrow June 1st. 2 tax years, absolutely.
Right. Well,
So I'm wrapping around 2 tax years. I've owned it for a 12-month period. So it's showing on 2 tax years. I've got a 12-month period of ownership, and at that point in time, the gloves are kind of off. I will likely muster an audit if I move into the property. The probability of being audited because you've centered on 2 tax years is very, very slim to none.
well, the question is doing a 1031 exchange from a commercial to a residential.
Like
That's the fundamental principle. Like kind is very, very broad. You can go commercial, residential, vacant land, multifamily. So you can go all over the place as long as you're holding it for investment purposes. It's a great estate planning tool, and people use it for that a lot. Like I'm going to sell this commercial building because I want to buy my retirement home in Shell Beach. So they'll do that, and then they'll hold it as a rental for a couple of years and then move into it. Another great tool. Is to diversify. So let's say I own a 40-unit apartment complex and I got 3 kids. Like when I die, what happens? They're going to fight over this asset. I'm going to sell the asset and I'm going to sell for $10 million, and I'm going to buy 3 properties for $3 million a piece, and each kid gets a property at the time of my death. Fair? Like that, so it's an estate planning tool, and it's used pretty regularly for that. Yeah, you had a question?
For adoption.
What are some examples of a vacant lot being used as an investment purpose?
So vacant land is always going to be acceptable for a 1031 exchange because you can't live on it. So, the question is an example. What would an example be?
Yeah.
Any vacant lot. Any vacant lot. It's an investment property because you can't live on it.
I guess she's asking, is that
Why
what
would you
she's
buy a
like,
vacant
why
lot?
would you buy it as an investment? Because it'll appreciate in value. You could build a house. You could grow something on it.
How do you prove it if you buy a vacant land and say I'm gonna build my primary on it? Like technically
can't.
you don't show income.
You can't build
So
a
so an
primary.
investment property does not need to show income to be qualified as an investment. Yeah, it does not need to show income. That's important. That's a great question. An income property, like an investment property, does not need to show income to be considered an investment. In fact, vacant land is a liability because you've got taxes. You've got to pay property taxes. You might get some grazing rights from a farmer, but you're not probably going to show income. So doesn't need to show income.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe fair. Oh, never mind. Good.
What about this? Yeah, so you sell the property and then you 1031 it into, say, commercial development.
So what you can exchange into, so
Like
that's
it's not built; it's being
that's
built.
so that that's a different type of exchange, which we can go into, but it's called an improvement exchange or a built to suit exchange. The time frames are once we're wrapping up here what like kind is, so that you guys have an idea
Yeah,
of what
that's
that
what
means.
I was going to allude
Yeah.
to is basically real property for real property. Is there, and you can't do to gold, right? Or am I wrong?
No, you cannot.
Yeah, so
you
that's
can't,
what
you
there's
can't
limitations.
transfer. So let's
Or racehorses or
No, you can exchange
Can't-
racehorses
can't
for
eat.
racehorses.
Yeah.
You can exchange cattle for cattle, but you can't exchange heifers for bulls. You can't cross
yeah, that's
genders,
one of the- yeah.
right? It's super specific. So when you convert, and and this is a great topic because I know like one of the hot phrases in today's investing world is what? What's your favorite hot phrase?
Cost
Cost segregation. I love cost segregation, right?
Yes.
It's a power tool. So I spoke to Kelly Pearl earlier today. She heads the Federation Exchange Commission, incredibly intelligent real estate attorney who's written, she's been involved in a lot of legislation that has current law. And this is what I know to be true. When you take real property, and cost segregation is converting the real, everything that's in the building. So let's say we talk, it's a commercial building and you've got heating and air conditioning, you've got windows, floors, all of these things that aren't brick and mortar. You pull that, you have an engineer come in and say, okay, you've got $1 million property, 300,000 of it are of these things. So you convert that to 1245 property, making it personal property. And you get to depreciate all of that in a year. First, well, now it's 75%, right? 100%. It's 80% this year, right? So you've done it. You get a huge tax advantage. Well, you've turned real property to personal property, and when you do a 1031 exchange, you can exchange real property for real property, but you've just peeled out $300,000 and said to the IRS that it's not, yeah, it's not recaptured at the capital gains rate, ordinary income tax, because that's what you deferred. Nightmare. Now, what you can do though, let's say, I'll use hotels as a great example, because this is where it happens most frequently. You buy a hotel, you cost seg out all the fixtures, furniture, equipment, the FF&Es, you have a huge, you buy a motel for $10 million, you could pull out $2.5 million in FF&Es, right? Huge advantage to get your company up and running. But when you do an exchange, so let's say it was a 100-unit motel or hotel, and
This
you want
hotel.
this hotel, right? But you want you're trading up, right? You want to buy a 200-suite hotel. You have a cost seg study done on that, and you take that 1245 property that you segged out over here, and you do a personal property exchange. So you do two exchanges: one for the real property, one for the personal property. No taxes are due.
It's a tool in the right circumstance.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But if you don't know that, and you plan on doing a 1031 exchange, you're going to get pinched when it comes to your tax return. Always talk to your CPA, your tax preparer, about what, when, and how if you're going to sell real property, whether you're going to do an exchange, not do an exchange, and bring all these things to light. Because if you find yourself on the other side, after you've closed escrow, you're screwed. Like, you have to get an exchange open before you close escrow. Right? So maybe let's talk about that. What does that look like? You open escrow on an investment property. You want to tell your real estate professional, your escrow officer, that you're doing an exchange. If you want to use an exchange company, I highly suggest using one of the two bigs. You've got IPX, that's wholly owned by Fidelity National Financial, and First American Exchange. Those two companies are probably the only ones I would ever do business with. And if I'm doing reverse exchange, I would lean heavily into First American Exchange product, because they've got a different program and it's a lot less expensive. But those are the two companies I would absolutely go. But you tell your realtor, tell your escrow officer, what happens is the exchange company gets assigned in to the escrow to receive the benefits of the sale. So what are the benefits of the sale?
Proceeds.
Cash, that's right. Cash, they're not taking any liability. So they own the cash. So escrow closes, all the cash goes to your exchange account, and that's when our second, one of our points on the little wheel there for your T, your time frame, starts ticking. There's a clock that starts ticking as soon as escrow closes. You have 180 days to complete your 1031 exchange. That's roughly 6 months, right? And that actually doesn't sound that bad, does it? You got 6 months to find suitable replacement property. Well, there's a smaller window inside of that. It's 45 days. You have 45 days to identify what it is you're going to purchase, and if it's not identified within 45 days, it's not eligible. That's it. It's black and white, right? This is what happens when you upset the IRS and they have to put rules in place. They make it really tough, right? Thank you, Starker. All right, so 45 days to identify. It's got to be in writing. It's got to be signed by the taxpayer and delivered to a qualified individual on or before midnight on the 45th day. So who's the qualified individual? 90% of the time, it's the exchange company. And if you want to prevent yourself from being grilled through an audit, use the exchange company. But the IRS doesn't say it has to be the exchange company. So a qualified person, as defined by the IRS, is anyone who is not disqualified. Thanks, guys. So, who's disqualified?
I'm out.
Yeah. Who's this? Nobody use that. Who's disqualified? Family members, like of linear descent. So your kids, grandkids, parents, grandparents.
Still unregulated to this day, right?
It is regular. Absolutely. If you get audited, you're screwed.
No, I'm talking about the intermediary, it's still unregulated.
Yeah. So that's why you use one of the two bigs.
Right, exactly.
So what he's referring to is they're basically an exchange company. Like they have received your money. Who oversees what they do with your money? No one. No one. And if you're using like Joe Smith down the street who opened his own exchange company, you could be putting all of your funds in peril. And Joe Parma was in Paso, actually ensconced with $38 million.
I mean, that interesting part, it's still to this day unregulated. You're saying to use the two bigs because they have history, reputation, experience, and circumstances.
Everybody's insured. Yeah, they've got.
Exactly, but that's what's crazy. To this day, it's still unregulated.
Ed Oken, just 10 years ago, was quoted saying he had one of the larger exchange companies in the country. He was quoted saying, "I'm an unregulated bank. I can do whatever I want." He pulled $50,000 out of the exchange company to fund his daughter's wedding. He's in prison now.
But to this day, you're still saying use
Wow.
those two guys because they're still unregulated.
Absolutely.
They're tied to big companies that have reputation to protect them.
Yeah.
Tremendous amount of business. Like Bill Foley with like.
Bill Foley, you bet.
I mean,
Precisely.
I know this guy. It's crazy, right? I mean,
It's-
still to this day, it's still unregulated.
Yep.
About Chicago, Fidelity. I mean, it's crazy. It seems kind of weird.
It is, but it is what it is, right?
Well, and you're realizing the benefits of what the government put in motion for, I mean, you have to follow suit on that. That's where you save money.
But these rules are in place for a reason, right? Nobody talks about the legitimacy of the exchange company. But if you're using one of the two bigs, you're not going to have to worry about it. Your money's going to be there. But the time frames, when you close escrow, the clock starts ticking on you. You've got 180 days, and that's where things can get a little sketchy. Like, oh crap, am I going to be able to make it in 180 days? And that pressure does not let up if your 45th day or 180th day is Christmas Day, Sunday. IRS does not care.
I'll add to that if you're using a very good realtor who knows how to find you a good property, like that helps, right? Because if they're just sending you like MLS listings and you're like, oh, that sucks, I'm not going to identify any of those properties, your time is ticking even worse and you're under the gun pretty much.
I would suggest this: if you've got a property that you're selling and you're going to be doing a 1031 exchange, let your real estate professional know immediately. Hey, I'm selling this asset. I'm going to have you list it. Find me something before we go into escrow on that. Because you can tie something up in escrow. You can get into escrow on your replacement property. Nothing really starts. The clock doesn't start until you close escrow, and you don't have to close escrow until you close escrow on the purchase. Till you close escrow on the relinquished property. So get in touch with somebody that can find you what you're looking for. Right? Mm-hmm. And let's say you've got something in escrow right now and you decide, okay, crap, I need to do an exchange. The fear of 45 days can keep you from actually selling. But here's the thing, if you hook up with one of these guys that knows what they're doing in the business, they're going to start looking for you when you go into escrow immediately. And how long is escrow? 45 days, 30, 45, somewhere in that range, right? So you've got 45 days while you're in escrow to look for a replacement property, get that thing tied up. Escrow closes, now your clock starts ticking. You got 45 days legitimately in the time frame. You got 3 months there to find a property. Like if you hire the right real estate professional, you'll find a property in 3 months. You really will. So I like to at least throw that out there so you guys have kind of a concept of what you can do with the right person in house, right? That's super important.
Jay?
Yeah.
What about if you buy the property first and do a reverse exchange?
So a reverse exchange, the time frame still exists. So a reverse exchange is like, let's say I find the property I want, and I don't want it to get away from me. I want to buy it, and then I'll sell something and exchange into it. You can do what's called a reverse exchange, where you buy the property, but you cannot exchange on the property you already own. So we're going to loop back around to the development concept that you got, because I don't want to forget that. So you can't exchange on the property you already own. So you can't buy this property. You hire the utility of a 1031 exchange company. They create what's called an EAT, an exchange accommodations title holder. It's a single purpose, single entity LLC. That LLC buys the property for you. Now it owns it, and the clock starts ticking as soon as you close escrow. You have 6 months to identify. You have 45 days to identify what you're going to sell. So if you've got multiple properties, you can name 3, right, and sell one of them, and then what you do is a simultaneous exchange. So the funds go from this escrow to this escrow. The problem here is, who's going to lend money to a non-recourse, single-purpose, single-entity LLC? Is there a lender in the house? Right? No one's going to lend to a non-recourse LLC. So how do you get the money to buy? You either have to have cash. You can't borrow money against the subject property. The IRS will call that a step transaction, and you'll get taxed on it. So you've got to have a relationship with a bank that will allow you to cross-collateralize, personally guarantee the funds, whatever that is. So let's say a $1 million purchase, right? I find somebody that's going to lend me $1 million. I buy the property. When I close escrow, like this is the property I want to sell, it closes. That $1 million comes from this escrow to this escrow because I've opened a new escrow, and the loan gets paid off. So if you have the money in the bank, lend it to yourself, and then you get paid back at the close. So a reverse exchange is really one of those situations where it happens most frequently when you're in escrow to sell something, you're in escrow to buy something, and you've got a week between, and the sale of your property gets postponed because somebody failed on that end. And you ask for an extension here, and the guy says, nope. I mean, prices have gone up, I'm putting it back on the market, I got a backup offer, you're like, crap, what do I do? You can do a reverse exchange. Now, the reverse exchange, like if you call an exchange company a delayed or simultaneous, a traditional 1031 exchange, it's going to cost you about $1,000. Yeah. A reverse exchange is going to cost you 10 grand. Yeah. So there's a huge expense on it. So if you've got a liability though of $200,000 in taxes, 10 grand is nothing.
Hey Jay, what percentage of participants in 1031 labeling the exchange property do the 3 property rule versus the 300% rule? How's that different?
Got it. So it's a 100% rule, and so when you're when you're identifying property, there's 3 rules, right? The first rule is you can identify up to 3. There's 3 rules, 2 that are used most regularly. Identify up to 3 properties. Their value is irrelevant. Right. And that's what most people do. Like, so if I sell $1 million asset, I want to buy, a replacement. I'm probably going to buy $1 million, $1.2 million, maybe. So you can identify 3 properties. If you're diversifying, though, let's say I've got the $10 million asset, and I want to buy, and it's estate planning. I got 10 kids, right? I want a $1 million property for each kid. I want to buy 10 properties. Well, the IRS has already told us that if it's not identified within 45 days, it doesn't qualify. And the first rule says you can only identify 3. Well, how in the hell am I going to buy 10 properties? Right? So the second rule of identification is you can identify up to 200% of your sales price. So if I sold a property for $10 million, I can identify $20 million in real estate. I'm only obligated to buy 10 to complete my 1031 exchange, but it gives me an option. Okay? And the third rule is that you can identify as much as you want, whatever value you want. There's the cork is out of the bottle. You can just pour offers all over the place, but you have to close on 95% of what you identify. Yeah. So I've never seen, in almost $2 billion in exchanges, I've never seen anybody execute it. Right? So the 2 that are most commonly used are the 3 property rule or the 200%
So
rule.
it's 200%, yeah.
200, yeah, 200%. What I said. So I was split in the middle with you. Like you said 3, I said 1. We'll settle on 2.
I knew there's 3 options, but
Yeah.
I love how you explained the last one. You've never seen it before.
Never.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's identifying real estate. So that's part of the time frame. Like we're talking about the 45 days. You have 45 days to identify, and this is what has to happen within that 45 days.
Can you define what identify is? Just for
It's got to be written. It has to be unambiguous. Property address, APN, legal description, and it has to be written down, signed by the taxpayer.
Like a tax form, or
not a tax form. So it's literally you have to sign it. So if there's a legal, like I said, the three options are legal description, APN or property address. So those are the.
And value. How does it affect when someone labels a value and the value they end up closing is wrong, where it actually goes over the 200%?
That would put you in harm's way. It really would.
So I've seen that, right?
Yeah. And so that would really put you in harm. So you have to be careful with. I mean, if you're going
so
to that.
Think about someone labels up 3 properties, right? It's at 200% in their mind's eye with what they're willing to accept offers on the property, and then they accept a multitude of whatever that is, and it's 220%. Because they didn't get the deal they wanted in the middle of the 45 days. How does that affect the exchange?
In practicality, it doesn't. Because you've identified 200%, but you're only required to purchase to your net sales price.
Got it.
So that's all the IRS is going to see in an audit. So they won't know what you've
So
identified.
they'll see the value of the one you purchased be 150% of what you labeled.
That's
but
right.
Still less than 200% cumulative.
Correct. So it's really not going to be, it's
Right,
non-problematic.
that's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the like kind and the time frames. Now the 2 V's, like one is value. Like so, what nice transition here from that conversation to what value? What does that mean that you have to exchange to a specific value? And that is the IRS uses the term the net sales price, and this is really important because the net sales price is different than the sales price, and it can be dramatically different than the proceeds. So your sales price, call it $1 million, right? What comes off the top of the sale? And a lot of people say, you know what, I want to sell, I want to do an exchange, but geez, I just have to go in more debt because I got real estate commissions, I got escrow fees, title fees, document transfer tax, I got to do all this is coming off the top. The IRS knows that that's happening. So they say, okay, here's your sales price of $1 million. You're going to have $100,000 in costs, like whatever the costs are, those hard costs I just mentioned, 10% roughly. You've got, that's what equals your net sales price. So this example, the net sales price is $900,000. That's what you need to purchase in replacement property to defer 100% of your gain. And you don't have to buy just one. You can diversify and buy up to 3, or you can buy multiple properties using the 200% rule. But the net sales price can be dramatically different than the net proceeds. Like what if you had a $400,000 loan that had to get paid off? So your client or you might think, okay, well, I've only got $500,000 in proceeds here. I need to find a $500 replacement property, right? No. $900,000 is that number. So there's 2 things that you really have to know. One, you can't touch the cash. If you touch $1 of it, you're getting taxed on $1. But what's also important to know is that it's not an all or nothing. Like say you want $100,000 to pay off a second on another property. You can take $100,000 out. You'll pay tax on it. But you got the $100,000 you need. And then your replacement requirement isn't $900,000, it's $800,000, right? If I'm buying replacement property, I know my net sales price was $900,000. My replacement properties have to equal $900,000. I have to use all the cash. I can't touch it. The exchange company has it in stewardship. I identify the property. They wire the funds over. I get a loan to purchase. I get a loan at $400,000. I've completed my exchange. Bob's your uncle, and everybody's happy as a clam, right? So what happens though if I don't want to get a new loan? Well, if you buy down, they call it boot, right? That boot triggers a taxable situation. If you buy down in value and you use all the cash and get a lower loan, you're going to have debt relief, boot in the form of debt relief, and taxes are going to be due on the difference of that $900,000 which you purchased to. If you got a $400,000 loan and like that I said earlier, you touched $100,000, you're still going down $100,000. You have cash boot that you're paying tax on. Well, what if I've got $400,000 in the bank that's earning me a half a basis point, right? Or 50 basis points, a 0.5%. That's nothing. I want to use that $400,000. I can take my $500,000 cash. I can bring $400,000 more cash to the table, not get a loan, and still complete the exchange with no taxable liability.
Love it.
Yeah. So there are options, and most people that you talk to will say, well, no, you have to go into debt. You don't. That's a misnomer. Most people do because who has $400,000 lying around? Well, if you do, and you're doing an exchange and it's not earning you any money, use it. Put it to good use. Right? So those are basically the fundamental values. The big difference is net sales price is different than net proceeds. Net sales price is what you need to exchange to. Right? That's the first V. The second V is vesting. Who owns the real estate? Whoever's on title at the time of close has to be on title to the replacement property. You can't change ownership midstream. And that seems pretty simple, right? But here's a lot of examples. You own a property in the name of an LLC. You and 3 partners, right? So Owen, Ben, and I own a property. We, the Trifecta LLC. We bought this beautiful 10-unit apartment complex, and we're selling it because we've got all our gain, and we each want to go buy a triplex. Well, the LLC owns the real estate. We don't own it individually. Subsequently, if we sell in the name of the LLC, we have to buy in the name of the LLC. And if we're all getting along, that's fine. Once escrow closes, we can then switch deeds, title insurance, the title settles around, and have a great time, right? But if we're feuding, that's why we're selling, because we just couldn't get along. If we don't own it in our own names, we're in trouble. So how do you fix that? We drop the LLC ownership. We put the vesting in tenants in common, which gives us our own specific interest. And then when we sell, we can all go our separate ways.
What's the time frame to do that before disposition?
Anytime before you enter escrow, right? If you enter escrow and you do that, the IRS will say, yeah, okay, the LLC owned it for 20 years. It held it as an investment. You individually held it for sale. Taxes are due, no exchange available to you. I will suggest too, if you do that, if this is part of the equation, make sure you file a final tax return for that entity. That entity has been closed out. Books are closed. It's no longer alive. We own the entity as individuals. Now, there's an option. Let's say Owen and I, we're still getting along, but Ben is ready to bury us in the backyard, so he wants out of this partnership. The LLC can still exist between Owen and I. We just carve Ben out. So Ben is now a tenant common owner with the LLC, and when we close, Ben wanted his cash anyway. He wants out. He can't do an exchange, but he can cash out. The entity can still exchange going forward. Most of the time what will happen is you might be on title with I own a property in Paso, right? I owned it prior to marriage. Married now, community property, but that's still sold and separate. That was carved out prior to marriage. And now we're buying a home in Shell Beach. Well, I'm gonna sell that, do an exchange, because it's a better investment for us, but I need my wife's income to qualify for the loan, because that's $1 million house, we're buying a $5 million house. So I need her income to qualify for the loan. She can't go on title with me because she's not on title of the property I'm selling. Yeah, so how do you fix something like that? We'll throw her on title prior to entering escrow, or we buy it as tenants in common, and then change the title after we're on title. So there's things you can do, but know that whoever sells has to buy.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. And those in a nutshell, guys, that's kind of the fundamental of the 1031 exchange. Now, there are other types of exchanges. We talked about a reverse exchange, which is costly, can be done, and if it's a tax advantage, absolutely go for it. The other type of exchange that is commonly talked about is the built-to-suit or improvement exchange. And it works similarly to a reverse exchange, where I've got a piece of land I want to develop, right? So I'm selling a $5 million asset, and I want to buy a chunk of land for $1 million, and I'm going to build an apartment complex on it. I know the apartment complex is probably going to cost me the $4 million that I have in the exchange account. So you can enlist the services of an exchange company. They're holding on to your $5 million. They use the first $1 million to create that single purpose, single entity LLC, the EAT, the exchange accommodation title holder, that buys the land in your behalf. Now they've got the rest of the funds that you need to funnel into to make the improvements. Mm-hmm. Here's the pinch. The exchange period doesn't change.
6 months.
You have 180 days to get it done. You got to deplete that account for 180 days. So how does this work? How would it work? It would be something like, okay, approved the plans, foundations poured, contractor needs to get out. Like, oh crap, I'm done. I'm leaving the state of California, I'm moving to Tennessee. So everything's in place. You just have to take down the land, and then you're having to buy the materials. That's the only way I've actually seen it function.
You have to complete construction in 6 months?
You don't have to complete construction. You have to deplete the exchange account.
What about prepaid contract?
Yeah.
For the contract?
There you go.
So that's not real property. You can't even have lumber delivered and lying on the ground, because that's still personal property.
What if part of the contract has him paying for all of the tangible part of the construction?
In the event of an audit, the IRS is going to ask what part of construction was done and complete, because they're looking to take all of that, because that's just labor.
Right.
Labor doesn't. That doesn't.
Well, that's how people are doing it.
Yeah. And here's the thing. People are doing all kinds of stuff. I was talking to a former colleague of mine yesterday about something else that he called me on, and he was telling me a story where somebody had blatant disregard for 1031 exchange rules, But and there was a realtor that was like, hey, listen, I don't want to represent you because this is illegal and I don't want to participate in illegal activity. Kudos for him. They did it. Well, the IRS has a finder's fee. If you call them and say, hey, this dude did something illegal, they'll pay you 10% of what they should have paid.
Oh God.
So the realtor called the
Yeah.
IRS, turned this guy in, and it was a $200,000 tax fudge. You know what the IRS said?
You get 20K?
It's not enough for us to even investigate.
Oh.
We're understaffed. We don't have the people for it. Thank you, but no thank you. Zach, I was in Santa Barbara.
Oh my God.
Is that crazy? So I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
So you could do it, but it's really hard.
It has to. The stars have to align.
Yeah.
It really does. It really
And
does.
the funds can be used for labor, but not materials?
That's an interesting question because labor isn't real property at all, is it?
No.
But that's the cost of getting the labor, getting the materials from personal to real property. So,
What if it's only like a portion of it though? Like, so say you're building it for like, say you have $4 million that you're going to put into it, but it's $8 million to finish construction.
as long as you depreciate the exchange account, you don't need a notice of completion. You don't need any of that stuff. So you can still deplete the exchange account. And I've seen exchange consumers like submit.
Like you guys, like with IPX, you're doing distributions to contractors as part of the.
Absolutely.
On money they're handing, and they're doing huge sums of money, and they're allocating them as like commodity versus labor, and that's.
And it's all spelled out, and it's all approved.
Time.
The IRS says that fine.
And if you guys have depleted your funds, that's your job, is to hold money and then follow suit, right? So that's interesting.
It's like I said, I've only seen a couple of, Steve Golis was a guy, a friend of mine that pulled it off in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, he's a big apartment guy down there.
Yeah, he is the apartment specialist.
No, for sure, but and it's not illegal, it's just like you said, you're trying to follow a tax code and you're spending money and depleting an account as accordingly, right? So
And
it's not.
I've had dozens of people I know get audited. I wasn't their accommodator, so because I've actually seen this. Like, so I work for IPX, right? I've been in a room on invitation of the consumer and their legal counsel because they needed somebody that had the rules and regs. And basically the reality here is that if you have questions and you call your CPA or your attorney, you're getting billed for hours.
Right.
Like, call me, I'll give you all the answers. And I teach those guys. It don't cost you anything. Right? And so I'm in these rooms and I've seen that like the exchange documents come across the table with IPX on the header and they just push it off to the side. IPX, great.
Bottom line,
Next.
the tax code's made for investment into real estate again, and it's like, right, as long as it's going in, I mean, that's the main motivation.
It is. And
Following the code of like the legislation.
And here's the thing, like the IRS doesn't rule on something ever unless they're forced to. So there's so much interpretation. That's why you want to really, really have a good quality CPA and talk to them about tax strategy and what you can or can't do. If you guys don't have one, the smartest guy I've ever met in my life is Eric Schwaegerle with Caliber. I mean, Chris Will, also an incredibly intelligent human. But finding a good quality CPA is crucially important.
Can you talk about price? Or yeah, you have a question first.
If you're a dealer, what are things that you can do to sort of immunize yourself from scrutiny? If, let's say I'm a dealer in vacant land and I have certain land that I want a 1031, what are steps that I can take to sort of immunize that from scrutiny?
If you're a dealer, you're pretty much dead. Because the IRS sees that as your ordinary course of income. If you're flipping houses, that's your ordinary course of income. The exchange opportunity is almost gone.
And in that case, the like kind, does it get more specific?
No, they just look at your revenue. Like, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a broker. I deal property. I flip houses. Like, okay, that's the course of ordinary income. You can't exchange. When you get audited, they will blow your exchange out of the water. Yeah, it's super unfortunate.
Even separate LLC, like everything, just all your ducks in a row, like everything.
If your business is dealer broker, right? Broker dealer, if you're selling properties, if you have a property that you own and you've owned it for a period of time that qualifies for a property that you can quantify with returns that you held this property for investment purposes, that it wasn't something that you were buying with the intent to improve, to flip, to broker out, that you had the intent to hold it, that they can't really deny that. But they're going to look at it with a fine-tooth comb because of the nature and character of your business. So make sure your ducks are in a row. And
For
so
the 12 months, yeah.
I would literally say if I'm in that business, I would hold the property for a couple of years, just to be safe. More than that 1 year period. I guarantee you though, if you hold it for 12 months and 1 day, you're straddling 2 tax years, and they come after you, any attorney will be able to probably defend you. Any attorney will take the case because they want to charge it as they go up against the IRS, right? For hours and hours and days and days and weeks and weeks at $3.50 an hour. But I mean, you've got a pretty, I would say, close to a bulletproof file if that's what you've got going. Now, if you buy a property for $500,000 and it takes you a year to make all the capital improvements, you put it back on the market for $1.5 million and try to do an exchange, they're going to nail you on that. They're going to have here's the thing, they're going to have to come after you. They're going to have a reason to audit you in the first place. Like, why would they audit you? I don't know. What happens is they audit you for something else. Like, you schedule C property, there's something that they didn't approve, so like you got red flagged, and then you got an audit, and then they go through this exchange and like, oh, wait a minute, let me get this straight. They'll literally go, like, look at old MLS files. Did you hire an agent to represent you and put it in the MLS before the construction was finished? They do those things to make sure they can nail you if you're a broker dealer. They're ruthless when it comes to that. If they have the staff, they might just go, it's not big enough. I wish I had a solid answer for you that you could go, oh, okay, this is what I need to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a constant problem for me, so if I go out of something that I JV'd in 5 years ago, before I became a dealer, and that's a separate LLC, this is the conversation I've had with other people.
Sure, and that would be more of a black and white issue. I mean, because you've owned it for 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, the IRS would have a really hard time trying to prove that you had the intent to sell that the whole time. And I've seen people buy a property, 3 months later sell it and complete an exchange, and the IRS not have a problem with it. So it really depends on, in that situation, that was an interesting situation. Rio Grande, guy bought a corner lot. He worked for city planning. He knew that a person bought 2 lots on either side, and the city was going to require him to tear that house down and put drainage in there. So he bought it for $400,000, turned around in 3 months and sold it for $800,000 because it was going to kill the guy's project.
Wow.
And he did a 1031 exchange into the next property, and the IRS said, oh, he had no intent to sell it, but the contractor made him an unsolicited offer. He would be a fool not to take advantage of it. So the IRS can't prevent you from making good business
By the way,
decisions.
Jay, you know that you don't avoid the taxes, you only defer them.
Defer, that's right.
That's all it is. So which just has some helpful benefits, but either way.
Defer, and then die.
Exactly.
And then die.
I'm just saying, it's a weird concept, right?
Yeah.
You never see the benefits of your gains until
So you keel
you're
over.
still on the hamster wheel.
Yeah, you used to be able with that before 2008-16.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know the whole deal, but that's.
Yeah.
Can you? Yeah.
Chelsea, you got a question?
So what happens if you 1031 exchange and then die, and then pass it to your kids? Do they have to?
They get a step up in basis. So they inherit the property at its current value. So if they sell it that very next day for what it was appraised at the time of death, they pay no tax. They get to put all the money in their pocket.
No capital gains tax.
No capital gains
But
tax.
inheritance tax.
If it's over, I don't know what the levels are now, but
like
last
10
time I
million or
looked, it was
12
like
million
5
total
million.
estate.
12 million. That's a lot of, there's a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of room there.
And how much do exchanges cost for everybody? Or I'm sure they're done.
If you're doing a standard exchange, they run from they're about just factor in $1,000.
1,500.
Yeah. If they got it. Yeah.
Follow up on the inheritance. If so, someone exchange and die, and then what's your take on the government potentially take that step up basis?
It's actually gone. That dollar value has gone up. Like it used, like 10 years ago, it was 4.5 million. Now it's 12. So you've got they're raising that bar so that generational wealth can be built. Yeah, I can't see them taking that away.
No.
Yeah.
The 12 is like 4.5.
Yeah, it's spendable dollars today as opposed to 8 years ago.
What about the 500,000 exemption for primary residence? Do you see that going up ever? Because I know that's been the same number for years and years.
It has, and I haven't heard any scuttlebutt or anybody talking about it.
It would help California, but not the rest of the
Quite a bit,
country.
Actually, they went the other way and capped property tax right up to 10 grand, right? So it's kind of
Right.
primary, it's kind of the other way. about
Going
it.
the other direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, any other questions? I mean, that was a lot of intel, but if you guys ever need anything, in the real estate realm, you got some great real estate professionals in the room. Owen and Ben, I don't know if they tell you, but they happen to sell real estate, right? That's what they do, right? But I know Jose's whole team's here. There's some great people in the room. But you can reach out to me if you need my phone number, contact information is on the bottom of that flyer, and I'm happy to help answer any question that you may have as it relates to IRC 1031.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so
That was great, you guys. So Q1, our focus this quarter is all about how to build wealth and keep it. So January we had 1031 exchanges. Next month we're going to have a tax professional come out, and tax season is coming up, so it's time to start making your plans so that you can save money on taxes. So we're going to have a tax specialist next month sharing ways to strategize around tax season, which, by the way, has been extended an extra month because of the floods and stuff in our county. May 15th is a new file date. Check with your CPA. I'm not a CPA.
And then also, we do have the next 2 months scheduled. So it's going to be February 22nd and March 22nd, both Wednesdays, same spot.
Yeah. In March, we're going to have an estate planning attorney come here who set up our trust and things like that. So it's all about, building wealth, but what do you do with it? You want to pass it down to your heirs, to your kids, give them a better way of life. That's the American dream, right? So once you're learning how to do 1031 exchange, build the wealth. Next month, it's tax saving strategies, how to save money on taxes. And then the next month will be how to
Die properly and
protect
leave
it
your
and pass it down to your kids. So yeah, it's really good stuff. So really excited this year. It's going to be great, action packed content, all kinds of good things that we've got focused on. And so yeah, you can mix and mingle and chat, and we will
also add the Facebook group. I think it's SLO Real Estate Investor Group or something like that. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. And yeah, then we basically, you can share deals on there.
Totally.
If you're looking for a partner, we encourage like reaching out and helping each
There
other.
you go.
So
If you guys
we're
haven't
open books and we can share.
If you haven't signed in yet and you want to be on the mail list, just be invited to future groups to get extra content that the speakers share. We've been sending out spreadsheets and tools that people have shared. You can sign up on this sheet here, and then we'll send out details as well as the Facebook group, so you can join the Facebook group and interact and share deals and network there too. So thanks for coming, everyone,
Yeah, thanks.
and have a great evening.